Hi, I'm Rick Albert, and welcome to The Key to the City of Angels, the podcast where we unlock the secrets of Los Angeles real estate. With over 300 real estate deals under my belt, I've seen it all, from house hacking strategies that build wealth to helping clients close multi-million-dollar deals in one of the most competitive markets in the world. Every week, I'll bring you expert insights, market trends, and inspiring success stories to help you navigate the LA real estate scene. Whether you're a first-time buyer, an investor, or just curious about what it takes to thrive in the City of Angels, this podcast is your guide to making smarter decisions and achieving your goals. So grab your keys. It's time to unlock your path to prosperity in Los Angeles real estate. Hello, everyone. Rick Albert here with another episode of The Key to the City of Angels. I have Justin Baker of Baker Wealth Strategies. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, I'm happy to be here this afternoon and talk with you.
Yeah, so this conversation is actually going to be really interesting because a lot of my guests were talking strictly real estate. And this one, it seems like based off our previous conversation, it's like there's always like a step beyond, like outside of real estate that we just don't think about, but we need to incorporate into our lives. Does that sound about right?
It does. Yeah, that is kind of the phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, wow, Rick, you just did my USP for me. But tell me a little bit about how you got into wealth strategy, a little bit about your business, and then we'll kind of jump into the questions.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I am a licensed attorney in the state of Texas. I've practiced in advanced estate planning for over a decade now. So I started off just doing, basic estate planning, kind of wills and power of attorney and that kind of thing, and then progressed along to the point where primarily I work with successful, closely held business owners who are kind of at that phase where they started the business, be it real estate investment, oil and gas, technology of some variety, where they started off and now it's really kind of taken hold and taking off for them. And I kind of help with evaluating, to your point, like the thing that they're good at. I don't need to help them out with, real estate investments. That's not where I can help out. But what risks are you facing right now, presently, with your business structure, organization, and then in the future for reasonably foreseeable contingencies such as incapacitation and death. So, like what happens then if nothing, if we don't do anything, kind of here's what it looks like. Does that sound right? If not, then maybe we'd kind of take a look at some other options. And then ultimately really looking at business succession, right? Like what happens with the business if you're unable or uninterested in continuing to do the business because you're ready to retire and enjoy, a little retirement. How do we look at getting out of the business? And especially if you have unrelated business partners.
Yeah, I mean, that's first of all, we all think we live forever,
Yeah.
right? But yet we could be hit by a bus tomorrow. Like
That's
that's a
right.
very real thing. And when we set up our trust, we did it knowing that we were intending on having kids. I had my condo at the time, but then I think it was after we bought the second house. I think it's like, okay, now we need to get our trust together, like get our shit together, because you just never know.
Right.
It's so I totally get it. But and I think with a lot of business owners, especially on the real estate side, you buy a rental and you don't necessarily run it like a business. That's super common, like just
Yes.
because you learn. So I guess the question is, at what point do you really start the planning when it's between a hobby and then becomes like a legitimate business? At what point
Yeah.
do you start the planning?
So for me, like when I look at it, I think, it's easier if we can take simple steps at the beginning to keep things on the right track, then it's
Mhm.
easier than going back and kind of trying to retrofit something the way that it should have been at the outset. So when I think about, oh, and I should start off with my disclaimer, right? Because I am
Oh
what
yeah, no
kind of
kidding.
attorney, what kind of attorney would I be without a disclaimer? But I
Yeah.
do want to be super clear on this one that I'm not giving anybody specific legal advice. It's we're just speaking generally about the topic, and nobody shouldn't take any kind of action without speaking to local counsel. If they're in California, speak with a California lawyer. I'm licensed in Texas. But these are generally speaking broadly applicable concepts that kind of are universal throughout a structure, right?
Sure.
So with that being said, I think when you buy your first piece of real property that you're going to use for investment purposes, at that point, like it should be in some sort of a legal entity that shields you personally from any liability that may attach to that property. And so when you think about that, from any that any liability that may attach as a result of the property itself. So for instance, there's a gas leak or whatever in the house, blows up and wrecks the houses all around. You want to make sure that whatever liability that may attach from a negligence perspective on your end is limited to that property through that LLC as probably the most common legal entity that you would see that, as well as whatever property and casualty insurance. So you want to have layers of protection built in there so that your intention of growing your wealth, growing your business doesn't, pardon the pun, based off of my example, blow up in your face and have the exact opposite effect. So I think, straight out of the gate, that's the right thing to do is make sure that it's owned properly in a structure that shields you from legal liability, as well as making sure that you have the proper property and casualty insurance in place. I think as you progress and you have a few properties, be they multifamily, single family, commercial, residential, whatever it may be, once you really kind of have a business going, I think that you need to look at how you're operating that business. If you have an overall holding company and then below it, the LLCs that own each individual piece of property. If you have a series LLC that, has each one of the pieces of property in one of the subcells, however you set it up, that you have an intentional structure that allows you to operate it like a business, and that you do operate it like a business, because different states, I mean, I can speak to Texas specifically, is pretty LLC friendly, so it's very hard to pierce the corporate veil. I do, in doing reading, I do see that California is less friendly so far as the ability to pierce the corporate veil. So you really have to treat it like a business and like a separate entity, not like an alter ego or your cash register or what have you. When you're going to buy something for the rental property, that you're not throwing your personal card down, that you have a business card and a business bank account for it. And then that way you can make sure that you're really getting out of the gate in a way that allows you to grow responsibly and without exposing yourself to kind of unintended but completely avoidable risk.
Yeah, I've had the LLC conversation with a lot of people, and the the pushback I generally get is like, well, to have an LLC for every individual property gets very expensive.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's where the Series LLC has come into play.
Okay.
So the Series LLC is designed for just such a person, right? Somebody who's got multiple real property investments. And so the concept is that you have an LLC that is identified when you register it with the Secretary of State as a Series LLC. And then each time you get a new property, you just create a new cell within that LLC, so that they're separated through cells, and you have individual books, just like you would for your rental property, right? Like you want to know,
Mhm.
how much am I paying for utilities at this rental property? How much am I paying in property tax at this rental property? So you keep separate books for it, but you just have the one LLC, because you're right, it can become super burdensome to have, if you had a dozen properties, now you got a dozen LLCs, you got a dozen annual reports that are due to the Secretary of State, to the comptroller. So yeah, it becomes very burdensome, and that's where the Series LLC was born out of.
Yeah. I know what we've also done. We actually have like an umbrella insurance policy,
Right.
right? Because it's like, and I've talked to people about that too, because like your liability only goes so far, but it's like umbrella, but it's like $500 a year
Yeah.
for like $1 million.
Yeah.
I'm
If you
like,
can if you can
yeah,
buy
it's
down
kind of a
risk that
no-brainer.
way, and that's for sure. Like I'm not, I don't know anything about property and casualty insurance.
Sure, sure,
I
sure,
know the
sure.
people who do, but I know that is like my next, like, you got to call a response, somebody who's familiar with this space,
Yeah.
and can get you connected with what you need to make sure that
Yeah,
you're,
right.
yeah.
So as any business grows, if you can set up an LC, if it makes sense to set it, you start setting that stuff up. And then, because I know one of the biggest challenges, I know people who've had to handle estates and all that is like they don't have contacts. They don't have. So like what we started doing, and even we're behind, I will totally guilty of this, is we have like a spreadsheet of like all of our property managers, all of these, like all these contacts as we go along. So we've kind of talked about when you first start a business, what happens when you're like in the thick of it before
Yeah.
retirement.
Yeah, so this is kind of this is that to me is an interesting period because now you've transitioned from the one problem of like, is this thing going to work? Did this thing has worked really well? And I think that there are a few things as you look at it that need to be considered. The first one, everybody's got their own priorities, but something's got to be first, right? So the first one I think is the succession planning piece.
Right.
So when you think of succession, what the things that would trigger a succession would be obviously if you have a long-term incapacitation. So think, and these are all fun topics, right? Because it's incapacitation and death, right? So
Right.
this is
Right.
all going to be,
Yeah. But it's inevitable.
it is, right?
Right. We
So
can't avoid it.
not mentioning it doesn't make it not happen. Uh,
Right.
so if it did, I swear I'd be mum. But it doesn't work that way. So, the stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, obviously we recently just had a pandemic come through. So
hmm
those types of things could create a long-term disability that would preclude your ability to continue to run the business. And then what? Right. So that's it's not just like put it on a cocktail napkin or maybe talk about it one Tuesday evening at a happy hour with your wife, but you really got to write it down, think it through, and go through with I mean, I'm a little biased in my opinion, but go through with legal counsel, kind of like what your
No, no,
options
for
look like
sure.
to make sure that you're considering all of the options there. So obviously incapacitation, we need to think about succession. Death, we need to think about succession. That's going to happen. If you just are ready to retire, right? You're like, hey, look, man, I've had a good run. I'd like to enjoy this, and I don't want to be involved in this day to day. Then looking at what your succession plan looks like there, and especially if you have an unrelated business partner, like, is that business partner going to buy you out? If
Mhm.
yes, how are we going to value? So let's agree on how we're going to value the business before it's time to sell the business, because everybody's getting along, and right now we don't know
Yeah.
who's going first. So we can say, what is a fair way to value this thing, right? And then also, if you're looking at it from a retirement perspective, like what do the payout terms look like? So that is it more like an annuity? Are there tax efficiencies to be gained by doing it in an installment sell versus a lump sum? Is a lump sum even feasible for the person? You're not trying to impoverish your business partner or strap
Right.
the business for capital. So what works, and then write those terms out. So that way, if the departure is because of a falling out between business partners, hey, back when we were agreeing on everything, we agreed on how we were going to do this. That's how we're going to do it. And then update that as time goes on. But what having that baseline of like, hey, here's what we said we're going to do when the time comes, really does help out. And it helps out because if you think about the death of one of the business partners, the premature death of one of the business partners, well, now the surviving spouse, you probably don't want to be in business. Like, you may have loved your business partner, but you don't necessarily want to be in business with their spouse.
Right.
So then we say, okay, then if I die prematurely, while we're still in the business, let's set up the conditions of how you buy my interest from my estate or from my trust, my revocable trust, or now
Mhm.
irrevocable because I'm dead, but at the time, revocable trust, so that my family's taken care of, but that it doesn't impoverish you. And you two aren't fighting, because you got to think they're on two opposite ends of the spectrum. The wife, the surviving spouse, in this instance, the wife is trying to get as much money as she can, not in a greedy way, but like, this is the last money I'm going to see from the business, so I would
Yeah.
like it valued as high as humanly possible. The business
Right.
partner is trying to pay the least amount as,
Sure. It's a
as possible.
sale.
Right. Yeah, that's the way it
It's a
works.
sale of a business.
Yeah. So rather than have them duke it out, like, let's just write it out ahead of time and make
Yeah.
sure we can both live with it, because it could be either one of us.
Yeah. Have you
So
ever seen an instance where it became a shit show because it wasn't written out
yeah, I
and
mean,
something
that's
just
almost
happened?
universally the case. Like, if it's not written down,
Yeah. So
is
so
it
how do you solve it?
well in court? I mean, and so is
Got it.
that
It goes that far.
yeah, that's right. Because when you're talking about several $1 million, and this is
Mm,
the last that you're going to see from it, yeah, it gets pretty litigious pretty quick. And as you might imagine, that taking door number two, through the court system is neither efficient nor cheap. So,
Mm,
that's where it gets really unfortunate. And then you do still have the matter of operating the business.
yeah,
So, now what if absent any other instructions and the surviving spouse being, the one who takes over the economic interest of their deceased partners, their deceased spouse's membership interest in the LLC or partnership interest in the limited partnership, they're getting that economic benefit. Now, they may not get to vote, but they certainly get an economic benefit, and you certainly do owe them, a duty of reasonableness in, making
sure.
distributions. So I mean, it's a tough spot. So that's why I say, look,
Would
let's not do it that
would
way.
that be an easier solution? Like if because I actually do have a business partner for a couple of our rentals. Now it happens to be a family member, so it's like we're me and it's actually my brother-in-law. So like we manage everything, but we do have wives. We're all fine, but we also t start to delegate tasks. That was one of our agreements, right? Like I handle certain tasks, he handles certain tasks. And we
Right.
do that also to like avoid fights. It also helps us in making decisions. But you're right, like if one of us passes, then we have this spouse, which again, our wives are totally on board. It took my wife a little bit, but she's on board now. Once she understood like the power of real estate, where she's like, wait, what just happened? I'm like, yeah, we just doubled our money. She's like, wait, what? But is if let's say there is a disagreement, could one structure be it's like, look, let's say I'm the one who passes away. My business partner's like, look, Rick's wife, what if I just manage everything? I'll give you your cut, but then I'm just going to take, let's say, a management fee on top of that because I'm now handling more.
Right.
Are those like types of structures you've seen, or
Yeah,
is
I
it
mean,
mostly
that would
just
be.
buyout?
Yeah, no, I think that is a great point, is that it doesn't have to be a buyout.
Yeah.
There are other options, right? So there is that option for sure, and then everything in between. That's the whole. I think if you work with somebody who's done enough of them, you can turn the puzzle piece in the right direction for whatever situation exists. Because there are plenty like that where it's like, hey, look, I love the idea of it. It's just it's not my thing, man. Like
Right.
I'm not wired that way. That's not where my interest is. That's not where my passion is. But I certainly don't want to upset the apple cart either. And then you have the other business partner who's like, dude, I just love this thing, man. Like, I'll just keep doing this. We'll split it. Let's kick a little bit more to me for the management aspect of
Yeah.
it, right? Because
Right, because there is
I'm picking
more
up,
stuff going on.
yeah. So I mean, I think that there are absolutely a multitude of ways to do it. I certainly like when I look at buy sell agreements or long term permanent disability kind of things. I do like to leverage. I mean, again, I'm not. It's not my. I bring in the right professional for it, but like I do like to leverage insurance for that, just to say, hey, look, let's have some liquidity available here to buy it out. Or if the death of a business partner is going to trigger like a serious problem with operating the business, now we got to bring somebody on. Now you've got liquidity
Mhm.
available to be able to fund the payroll in order to buy down, the risk of, oh my goodness, this business is going to die with the business partner who died prematurely. So I think just really taking a holistic look at it. Because if this is the golden goose, man, we got to take care of it. And so that's really for me I just look at, because I mean, my wife and I both, we own Baker Wealth Strategies, right? And I know
Yeah.
how much we put into to growing it, and what it means for our family. So I'm a closely held business owner as well.
Yeah.
And when I think about that from the client perspective of like how when you're first starting out, like your stomach's bleeding trying to make payroll or trying to, pay the bank for whatever. And then you get to the point where, you've actually gained traction, you've had success, and you sustained success. Man, to imperil it unnecessarily and unwittingly would just be really, really unfortunate.
Yeah. Have you noticed any trends with your clients or in general over the last, let's say, like past like year, couple years of like problems you've been seeing that are somewhat new, anything like that that we should be aware of?
Yeah, there's one in particular that's hit because I do have we have several clients who are real estate investors, be it short-term rental or triple net, like ground lease kind of deals, or multifamily housing, commercial property. One thing that I have seen come up a lot is maybe some dubious tax strategies around
No.
yeah, that's it. And so I would certainly I mean for real estate investors, there are some out there that are perfectly legitimate, absolutely
Sure.
legitimate, but there are many like that get broadly marketed. It's like, oh, I don't even need to hear your situation. This one works. I would just tell you, like, be super cautious of that. The IRS actually has a website. If you just Google IRS Dirty Dozen, you'll see on the IRS
Now I
Dirty
have to look
Dozen.
it up.
Yep,
IRS Dirty Dozen.
yep. Every year they come out with the top 12 tax is I'm using their tax scams that they're tracking and really bringing down the enforcement hammer on. So I would just urge folks to take a look at that. And certainly before you do employ any kind of tax strategy, be it a capital gains or income tax strategy, get an independent tax attorney's opinion on it. Not one who does not get paid for you doing it or not doing it, but just for giving you their professional opinion on the proposed structure. The other one is that I've seen, particularly for real estate investors, a trend is there's a lot of marketing to real estate investors right now, and you may have seen it as well, of like super complicated legal liability structures with like land trust here and a South Dakota trust here, and if they can't
Oh, right.
see you, they can't sue you, and like it's just like you look at it and man, it's just an eye chart, like the diagram of what you should do, and it's like, dude, I own two short-term rentals in a house that I live in. Well, how am I not one of the Gatsby's over here? Uh,
Right.
so I look at that, and I mean, it's great marketing. I mean, it's great marketing. It's super fancy. Like it's very, very, very complicated. A lot of arrows and flow charts and symbols and whatnot. But it doesn't do a whole lot. But it does cost a whole lot. So
Yeah.
I would certainly suggest just be aware of that, and because there's that. It's almost like the Goldilocks deal, right? Like too little planning is no good,
Right.
but too much planning is also not good from an economic efficiency standpoint. So that's why I say, like, if we just look at the actual risk that exists, if somebody comes to you with a solution set before they hear the problem, we should probably like reconsider what.
Thank you. You should run.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
go. Let's
Yeah,
call it what it is.
yeah. Thank them for their time and then hit the bricks. Yeah,
It's funny. When a while back when I was interviewing financial advisors, just because like it was funny 'cause people are like, Rick, why do you need a financial advisor? It's like, because I know real estate, but I don't know my wife's 401k. I don't know this. I'd rather delegate it. But we
yeah,
met with a financial advisor, one of those like quote unquote free ones, right? Which they're never free.
right.
And they're like, we have this pyramid, and in the pyramid, we have your foundation or like a house, whatever. Here's the foundation. I'm looking at the foundation, and it's everything he can make a commission off of. And then it's like disability insurance, this insurance, that insurance, setting the I'm like, and like real estate was like the very like last thing you do. And I'm like, but real estate's my thing. And you're
Right,
telling me that's the last thing I have to do? But yet here's all these things you make money off of.
right. No, that's absolutely, and I mean, I think that's the point is but that's the same slide deck. All they had to do is change the name, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's why I say, like, if somebody has like, you don't even got to tell me your situation. I'm going to tell you the solution kind of setup. Then, I mean, it's probably not. It may be one size fits you, but it's one. I assure you, it is not customized to your unique situation.
It's funny because like when I go, so like this for realtors, the stereotypical things like to have a listing presentation. Here's everything I'm gonna do to get your home sold. And it's like, and it works. Don't get me wrong, it works. But I've noticed that I have one, but I rarely use it because you're right, every situation's different. And it's like, so I go in, it's like, tell me why you're moving, tell me your situation, then I can tailor a plan around it. There are certain things, open houses,
Sure.
whatever. But
Yeah.
like, but you're right. It's like, okay, but you're telling me, like, I have a listing coming up. I've got to send out for signature. But she's like, no, Rick, I only have enough money to hold on to this property for 2 more months. I'm like, well, that's a very different strategy than someone who's like, oh no, I can wait.
Yeah,
You know, it's
for
like,
sure.
okay, so this is a pricing play. This is this, but like totally different. You're right. Everyone has to be customized. But
Yeah.
have you noticed when, for some of these businesses, when it starts off as a hobby versus now we're in the thick of it, those are two very different plans and things take turns, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you navigate some of that?
Yeah. So I think the critical piece to me with any piece of estate planning, and in that scenario in particular, is to have flexibility built into the design
Okay.
at the outset. Because then, it's people's interests change, their level of engagement changes, level of success changes, what life changes, right? They have kids, and
Sure.
now, I used to have all the time to do this, but now I'm, replacing batteries in kids' toys and downloading apps. So I can't spend as much time on the thing as I used to. So I think having flexibility built into the structure, which in, if you do an estate plan, you know, and you own real property, certainly investment real property, but anything other than your primary residence, probably a revocable trust is probably going to be in your future, right? And
Right.
so the revocable trust, and with any of these like documents, the revocable trust, an irrevocable life insurance trust, whatever it may be, the name on it is the name on it, but the contents within and the unique specifications that you may have of who you want to take over for you if something should happen to you may be different. And when you pass away, how you want things to go. Do you want to go outright? Do you want to go and trust to the kids? At what age do you want the kids to get involved? All those is what makes it kind of customized. But to answer your question, with the hobby versus the hey, look, we're in the thick of it situation,
Yeah.
there are foundational documents for any kind of planning that deals with incapacitation and death. The revocable trust in that instance is probably going to be a pretty critical one because it really helps maintain continuity in the event of incapacitation. Because coming in as a successor trustee versus a power of attorney. So if I come in as successor trustee on trust-owned property, such as a real property that we're talking about, it's a lot different situation than a power of attorney. Because I don't know if you've ever taken a power of attorney to the bank before to try to exercise that, but man, it's not just like smooth sailing. Like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for bringing in this power of attorney. Like oftentimes, like, well, it has to be our power of attorney. We don't accept powers of attorney. Power of attorney can
Yeah.
only do this, but not that. And you're like, no, dude, the document says that I can do all these things, and the bank is going to give you the runaround, give you the business, and they have to protect themselves. I don't like it, so I'm a little biased about it, but I will at
You know,
least see
like the
it.
banks? You
Yeah,
know, like the
that's
process.
right. That's right. That this account holder executed this legal document that the state legislature has said is binding, and here I am, and you're saying no. But I do understand that they have a liability perspective that they're on the
Hmm.
hook for it if they make a mistake. So it's easier to just say no at the outset. Got it. Anyway, the point being that the revocable living trust during incapacitation allows for better continuity of control and a much more robust instruction book. Because like the power of attorney, if you think about a durable power of attorney, it says my power of attorney can do all these things. It can buy and sell property, it can take out a mortgage, can rent it, can, do this, can do that. But really, it doesn't say what I want you to do. And that's what the trust document talks about
Mm.
is, that's where we really sit back and give some thought to, okay, not just what can they do, but, what do we want them to do? Like, what should they do? And I think that that's the level of clarity that you probably should pass along, be it a hobby or a business, relative to a real estate investment, because that's not an immaterial investment, right? Like I didn't go down and buy some Pokemon cards. I,
Hey, those could be worth something.
I'm not saying they're not.
Right, wait, what is it, the Beanie Babies or whatever it
Yeah,
was?
that's
That all of a sudden
right.
are worth like 10 grand. You're like, dude, it's fabric and like stuff with God knows what. Probably drugs, really. But it's just like, we just don't know.
It would have to be, or yeah, just gold. I don't know, something.
Yeah, right? Like, wow, this one feels really heavy.
But this is a tangible thing that has some real, repercussions if it's not properly managed. So I think that regardless of hobby or full on, active business, the revocable trust is going to play a role there in owning the membership interests of the LLC that owns the properties. And then, as you kind of, if you kind of fiddle around with real estate and you're just kind of a hobby investor, you're like, well, I gotta a house over here that I rent out, to a nice family and everything's been cool. And that's where you stay, then you're probably fine where you are. But as you
Right.
start to grow dynastic wealth, like if you really do this as a business and you have dynastic level wealth that you're going to pass on to your kids, to your grandkids, and you do happen to trip over the estate tax exemption amount, which right now per individual is $13.99 million for a married couple. Let's just call it 28. Do easy math. I didn't go to law school because I love math. So let's
Right.
call it 14 million. Let's call it 13.99, close enough to 14 million to say for a married couple it's $28 million. That's the estate tax exemption. So if you do have enough in a net wealth and taxable estate when you pass away, and estate tax is a concern, there's certainly more advanced planning that happens at that level, and sooner does beat later. So I say this about estate tax planning is first one is that sooner beats later, because the further from the moment that we need to put the plan together, the better, the more numerous and more favorable the options are. The closer in we get, it gets a little tougher, but we can get from here to there. If we wait until the moment of crisis, then we're just kind of playing the hand we're dealt. So sooner beats later on that for estate planning, and certainly for estate tax planning. The other piece is that right now, as I mentioned, the estate tax exemption for a married couple is right at $28 million. The Tax Cuts and Job Act will probably get extended. I'm not a soothsayer, oracle, or anything, but it just seems that's the
Right.
way.
Everything's always predicated on like, well, politics aside.
Right,
I know people
right.
are like, oh yeah, the market's going to crash because of A, B, and C, unless the government steps in. I'm like, that's such a big component.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. And so that's where I say, like, it looks like to me that the Tax Cuts and Job Act would be extended. But what's important to know is the estate tax exemption amount that you're worried about is not the one that exists when you do the planning. It's the one that exists when you do the dying. So if it is reasonably foreseeable, as we, again, politics aside, right? We have a
sure.
pretty significant national debt, and at some point the tax man cometh. That's just kind of the way it works. And reducing the estate tax exemption back down to more historic normative levels of $10 million would probably be not terribly objectionable tax to look at, right?
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that's what, hey, I'm like the economist, man. I don't know if it's good or bad. I'm just saying it seems reasonable to say that one's probably on the chopping block. And it certainly was when President Biden put forth his tax plan, back in whenever that was now. What was it, 21?
Yeah, I think so.
So, and it almost made it through.
Yeah.
So the estate tax exemption was certainly on the chopping block there. And so I would say it's probably reasonable to believe that in the future you kind of have to use a little, I guess, Kentucky windage, right? To think, okay, I'm at 20 million in net wealth. I don't plan to die, today or tomorrow. God knows what may happen, right? But hopefully I live out my actuarial life. So 20 years from now, what's the estate tax exemption going to be? I don't know, but I do know that
Mm.
my wealth will continue to grow. I do know that it's likely that the estate tax exemption will be reduced. So I may look and see kind of like what moves can I make now to help reduce that exposure in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I was told by one of my mentors, like, never make business decisions based off taxes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because you just don't know.
yeah,
I mean, we can plan, we can make certain like generic assumptions, but you're right, but even when we go into, and we'll kind of talk about we'll call it the final phase, which is when someone's passing away, whatever, you do have a lot of people who are inheriting large sums of money, they're inheriting these businesses, whatever the case may be. Some people have never had this kind of money before. I mean, if you
yeah,
think about it, there was homes in LA that were selling for like 50 grand. Now they're worth 1.5 million as a teardown. That person who just inherited that house is now technically a millionaire. They
yeah,
could have
yeah,
been working at like Chick-fil-A,
right.
but their grandparents lived there, never moved, and called it. So, how does, now that we're kind of ending that section, what are the next steps? Let's say someone does pass away, you have this active business, you have real estate, whatever it is. What do we do?
Yeah, so that's why I mean I like to look to the left of it, and I really do think that open and frank conversations with
Yeah.
whoever, the younger generation, whoever your successor is going to be. Hey, man, maybe you wouldn't have picked him, but they're what you got, right? So
Right.
have open and frank conversations about, what's where, how does this work? Oftentimes in those situations, you'll find that one of the children is involved in the business. They really kind of took a shine to it, and the other one's not involved in the business. So we got
Right.
to figure out how are we going to take care of both. If the one child is going to succeed in your role, as operating the business, and the other child's interests, they just lie elsewhere. How are we going to make sure that they're taken care of? If equal is the intent, how do we get there? There are certainly ways to get there. And so I think having that conversation in advance is important. I think also structuring how it passes is important, because a lot of times, and I've had this with clients before, where they had enormously successful businesses, home builders, commercial real property owners, where it is better to have that asset owned by a trust and then have the trustee find who the board of directors is going to be that provides the oversight and governance of that entity, to hire the CEO, to hire the CFO, essentially the C-suite, and to provide that level of oversight of the business, to make sure, because if that's the golden goose, man, you got to give it to somebody. If you don't have somebody who can do it, and if it is not your intent to sell it because you don't want to do a fire sale at death kind of a deal, then really looking at the trust owned entity with really specific instructions about how the board will be comprised, who the trustee can select, who they must select, if there's going to be family on the board, how we offset so it's not just like a family like get together. So it's really pretty involved. And so for a lot of people, it's not the level where we need to get a board together, but it could be a level where it is a trust owned property, and the trustee does have oversight responsibility for making sure that the entity is properly run. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of factors that go into
Uh,
it.
well, it was interesting. So I know someone, their family member passed away. He had an active CPA business. And like, well, why don't we try to sell the business? And so they started making phone calls, and what they learned was the business actually wasn't worth anything
Yeah,
because that person was the value.
yeah,
These clients are like, well, I know that person passed away. Now you're just pawning me off to someone else. So they
yeah,
reach out to other CPA firms. They're like, thanks, but no thanks. Because like they're like, what? We're gonna inherit all of this, and maybe we'll get some retention. Maybe we won't. Like it's almost like that. That's why you tend to see with like attorneys, like right, the attorney joins another firm. That's
yeah,
their succession plan.
yeah, yep,
You know,
yep,
that sort of
yep.
deal.
And I think it's a really tough spot, because it's not uncommon at all for a closely held business that the business owner is the business, right?
Right.
And so the value diminishes quite significantly, if not entirely, at the death or incapacitation of that person, because that is the person who made it run. So
Right.
with that in mind, that's where I look at, again, if that is the case, then what? And so there are, structures we can build in, if it's a key man life insurance policy, to provide some liquidity to keep things running, keep the lights on, and not have a complete fire sale on the way out the door. If it is a situation where, if we did have 6 months of liquidity, then we could bring in somebody who could take the reins and get this going.
Oh, okay.
So, the the look from that perspective to me that's a tough one, because especially if you have employees, because like it's I'm sure they'll be super sad for your passing, but they're also going to be super annoyed that, now, like, I've worked here for 20 years, and we didn't have any structure in place for if something happens to you. Like, are you
Mm,
kidding? So, I mean, I think of that responsibility because, like, especially for a small, closely held business, employees are like family, they've
yeah.
been with you forever. They've done every role there is to do, from the one you hired them to taking out the trash to running to Costco, to setting up all the stuff for, a client meeting, and everybody pitches in together. And so to know that, you're the one who's keeping it running, and you've done nothing other than, I frequently say, and I sincerely believe it, if plan A is nothing bad happens, then plan B can't be for plan A to work. We got to have a real plan B.
Right.
And so I think that is another factor to consider relative to, like, once you've gone past hobby and into business, that again, it is a deal where when you have employees, this is a major source of income for the family, if not the major source of income for the family. And the intention is that, it stays such for the benefit of the family, even at my passing, even at my incapacitation. Well, then it's not just going to happen. And I see it a lot where when there is no planning, we talked about this a little bit before, but it really can tend to tear families apart. And I think that that's the ultimate tragedy of, like, you spent your whole life building this successful business, and then at your death, the thing that you hope would help provide for the family provides the catalyst for, like, a lot of division, a lot of hurt feelings, and that just didn't have to be there.
Yeah. I wonder if on the business side, I don't know if you have this conversation with your clients, but like, hey, let's look at your systems that are in place to run the business. So, like, for example, using that CPA as an example, there's some software where the client can go online, look up their past tax returns, right? But there's other software that doesn't.
Yeah.
So, like, I wonder, like, are you having some of those conversations like, okay, God forbid something happens to you, can your clients access what they need?
Right.
Like, there's all these other components that kind of go around it that we don't think about because, again, we think we're never going to get hit by a bus or whatever the case may be. And now your kids have to deal with it, but your kids may not be in the real estate business.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the same way. I mean, if you just take it a step back and say, hey, look, even if I didn't own a business, if something happened to me and my wife, like, would our kids are young, but, like, would our siblings be able to come in
Hmm.
and find, like, where's the checkbook? What accounts they have? How are they paying the bills? How are they paying the mortgage? How does this operate? Right. And
Yeah.
so, obviously, I mean, I do this for a living, so they do. I've got my instruction book handy, and not put in a safe deposit box where they couldn't get to it, but
As I'm
kept here.
taking notes of like all the things I'm screwing up on. Thank you. Thank you,
But
Justin.
I do.
Appreciate
So but the
it.
same for a business, right? Like,
Right.
if you always have in a small business, like, that risk of this is the one person who can make the thing go, or can log into the vault where we keep client files, or whatever it may be. So it's not just like the engineer, or the real estate investor, but all the support and operations folks who behind the scenes, like, keep all the trains running on time, so that you can do what you need to do. But then if we lose a key person, are we stuck? I mean, what do we do?
Mm.
So I do think having that, continuity of operations manual is really important. And again, it's not one that's like, it's that whole quadrant thing of, like, urgent but not important, and not
Oh
important.
yeah, the four quad was
Yeah.
it Eisenhower or something? The guy who golfed the most out of all presidents.
That's right. Yeah. But so this is it's not urgent, but it is important. And it's not urgent until it is, and
Right.
unfortunately we don't know exactly when that is. So I just think, as you look at it, like, from a family perspective, from a business perspective, if something happened to the both of us, have we done the things that we need to do to make it easy enough? Because hopefully our loved ones will be going through an emotionally difficult time if something happens to us.
Right.
And now
And
I
they
don't
shouldn't
want
have
to.
to deal with this.
Right, that's right. I don't want to make it also, like, be a retroactive mind reader and think, what would I have done if I were here? Just, here's what I would have done, man. The instructions are written out, and that's part of, like, the estate planning piece. And like I said, for the more complicated, higher net wealth business owners, the estate tax planning piece of kind of like, here are all the documents, but then also just having, like, an overview of, like, what we're trying to do here, instead of just, like, little breadcrumbs here and there. Like, don't make it a don't make it a
A
mystery here.
hunt.
Like, yeah, don't play hide the ball, man. Just make it as plain as possible. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Okay. Was there anything as we kind of wrap this up? Is there anything else that you think people should know about all this? Has been like amazing information, by the way. I really appreciate it.
No, for sure. I mean, hey, look, I love this stuff, man. I talk about it
Yeah.
all day long. But when I so like to close it out, I mean, I definitely think if I would suggest like don't wait on estate planning. It really is important, the burden exists, and so really the question is who's going to take on the burden? Are you going to shift it to the surviving spouse? Are you going to shift it to your surviving children, siblings, or are you just going to take it on and say, hey, look, I hate talking about this stuff. As I look at my budget, I got $0.00 in the line item for estate planning. But you know what? I'm going to go do this. It's important. And now sooner beats later, right? So
Yeah.
I think that that's really important. I really do think that as you look at your investment properties, you really got to look at the entity, the structure that you hold it in, to make sure that you've shielded yourself as reasonably as possible from any personal liability, any legal liability that arises attaching to you personally. And then, make find a good property casualty broker who can help make sure that your insurance is straight. And when you call with a problem, you don't get well, you see on page 75, there's an exclusion for that. So that you're covered really well there. And those are I think my big takeaways would be, if you could focus in on those three, I think you'll be all right.
Okay. And if not, people can rewatch the episode or re-listen,
That's
right?
right. Right. It's
So,
edging your seat excitement, man. We're talking about death and incapacitation.
right, who doesn't want to talk about that? But we got baby boomers, right? It's kind of like the millennials' parents, the millennials' grandparents. It's happening. It's going to be a
Yeah.
big thing in the next, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And that's really not that long.
It's not. And the
It's
transfer of
not.
wealth that's happening, as the baby boomer generation ages, the transfer of wealth that's happening is substantial. So I think that making sure that it's as tax efficient as possible and done as responsibly as possible, given, whatever your unique landscape is really important.
Nice. All right. Well, Justin, how can anyone get a hold of you?
Oh yeah. So the
Oh yeah,
website,
no big deal.
well, they just call out and I'll answer. So bakerwealthstrategies.com is the website. And if anybody has heard something, they're like, wait a minute, I think I heard that wrong, or I would like to hear that again or hear more. Whatever. If you like, I love talking about stuff. So my email address is justin@bakerwealthstrategies.com. So everything's spelled traditionally there. But if you just go to bakerwealthstrategies.com, then you'll find a link to get a hold of me as well. So certainly
Perfect.
happy to talk to anybody that would like to talk estate planning or entity structure, real estate investment, land trust, South Dakota trust, any of it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening or watching, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in to The Key to the City of Angels. I hope you found today's episode helpful as you navigate the world of Los Angeles real estate. Whether you're looking to buy your first home, expand your investment portfolio, or sell in this competitive market, I'm here to help you succeed. Let's connect. Visit my website or follow me on social media to learn more about how I can help you achieve your real estate goals. And if you're ready to take the next step, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to work with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit. Together, let's unlock your potential and make your real estate dreams a reality.